Today's daf is daf pei beis, and of course we begin on the top of the Amud with the Mishnah. This Mishnah is the Mishnah of Chinuch, which means that we prepare the Tinokas by training them up front in advance for the fast of Yom Kippur. And that's a D'Rabbanan. On a D'Oraisa level, a boy is chayev at the age of 13 and 1 day if he has shtei saras, and a girl at the age of 12 and 1 day if she has shtei saras. The Mishnah says, Hatinokos ein ma'anan osan b'yom kippurim. In other words, we're not obligated to prevent them from eating on Yom Kippurim. Aval mechanchen osam, we should train them lifnei shana, that they should start already minimizing their achila on Yom Kippur a few hours earlier. And lifnei shana, now the word lifnei, the phrase lifnei shana means, as Rashi explains it, and again, Rashi says, machanchen otzon l'sha'os, so we're talking about stopping to eat a little bit later than they normally would. So let's say they eat normally at 9, they should stop eating at 9, and instead of starting to eat at 9, they should eat at 10. That's called machanchen otzon l'sha'os. And Rashi says that lifnei shana, you'll notice that Rashi adds the word shehi smucha lepirka. So it means 1 year before the year of Samach Lepirkan, which would mean 2 years before Gadlus. V'lifnei shnatayim, and even 2 years before Samach Lepirkan, which would mean 3 years before they reach Gadlus. And the Gemara is immediately going to ask, once you told me 2 years, I'm going to say, once you told me 3 years, why did you have to tell me 2 years? B'shvil shiyu regilos b'mitzvos. And the Mishnah seems to indicate that this is just one application of a general rule of chinuch that applies to all mitzvahs. We're not talking about a specific phenomenon of chinuch, an obligation of chinuch that only applies and is exclusive to Yom Kippur, but rather it applies to all mitzvahs. And this is just one particular application. So Pirkon is the time of Gadlus. Samach Lepirkon means a year before Gadlus, and Lifnei Shana means 1 year before Samach Lepirkon. Lifnei Shnatayim means 2 years before Samach Lepirkon, and that would mean, in the case of a girl, to start at the age of 9, in the case of a boy, to start at the age of 10. So the Gemara immediately asks, Hashna b'fnei shtayim, if the Mishnah went ahead and said that you need 2 years before Samach Lepirkon, which means 3 years earlier, is Machanchen Lahu, we have to already train the children to stop eating a little bit earlier than they normally would, meaning to fast and delay their breakfast. Is b'fnei shana mi boile? Why do you have to tell me that 1 year samach lepirkon, which means 2 years before Gadlus? If you tell me 3 years, so don't tell me 2 years. Rav Chizda lo kasha ha b'chole ha b'bari. Rashi says b'chole kachush v'tashush koach. We're talking about a child that has a weaker kind of a body. The comportment is a bit weaker, and that's the difference between shnatayim and shana. 2 years is for a bari, but if the child's composition is weaker, that's called a chole. We should wait another year, delay the process of chinuch l'shos for 1 year. Now the Gemara quotes an opinion of Rav Huna, and then we'll see Rav Nachman, to disagree with Rav Chizda. Rav Huna, and again, according to Rav Huna, we'll see that we have to reinterpret the Mishnah. Ben Shmona, we're talking now about a girl, and she's healthy. She's got a solid composition. She should already be trained for shows again at the age of 8. In other words, 4 years before Gadlus, and Uben Tesha, meaning if she's weak in composition, so she's called a chola, then we'll delay it by 1 year, and she'll start only 3 years before Gadlus for shows, and that would be at the age of 9. B'chanchin oso l'shos. Then Rav Huna says, we have a different mitzvah of chinuch, in addition to shows, and that's called hashlama. Hashlama means to complete the fast, not just to delay breakfast for an hour or two, but it means to fast the entire day of Yom Kippur. And that's going to be, in the case of a girl, ben Eser, 2 years before Gadlus, uben Achatesrei, or 1 year before Gadlus. In the first case, we're talking about a bria, a healthy girl. In the second, a weak girl, and therefore she gets hashlama for only 1 year. Mashlim midrabbanan. Obviously, this is a doraisa. Only when she reaches the age of 12, ben shteimisrei, then mashlim midoraisa. Then she has to complete the fast on a doraisa level. And Rav Huna ends with the word bitinokas. Everything that I've spoken about is with regard to a girl, and with regard to a boy, everything is postponed by 1 year. Just to summarize, the main breakthrough here of Rav Huna, we didn't see this in Rav Chizda, is that there are 2 chunks of time. There's one chunk of time called chinuch l'shos, and another that's called hashlama. It's all d'Rabbanan, but the fundamental difference is l'shos means delay eating, and that gives you an hour or 2 of fasting, whereas hashlama means to complete the entire fast, a whole day of Yom Kippur fasting. And that's not something that we saw in Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda never addressed the issue of hashlama. It could be it's not on his radar screen, we don't know. Rav Chizda doesn't address that issue of hashlama. But he's focused totally on shos, on chinuch l'shos. And according to Rav Chizda, chinuch l'shos means that in the case of a girl, she'll start chinuch l'shos at the age of 9, and if she's a chola at the age of 10. And again, we push it forward by 1 year in the case of a boy. So the machlokes between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda will apply to chinuch l'shos. Forget about the issue of hashlama, which Rav Chizda doesn't even recognize hashlama. But even as far as shos is concerned, Rav Huna starts the chinuch l'shos for a healthy girl at the age of 8, for a healthy boy at the age of 9, which means 4 years before Gadlus. Rav Chizda, on the other hand, for a bari, let's say in the case of a tinokes, will start at the age of 9. So his chinuch l'shos is 1 year later than that of Rav Huna, and it's only 3 years and not 4 years. And again, just subtract 1 when you're dealing with a boy. Now, Rav Nachman is not going to disagree with Rav Huna. He's only going to calculate these 2 categories of chinuch l'shos and chinuch l'hashlama for a boy, whereas Rav Huna was addressing a girl. Rav Nachman Omar ben Tesha. So whereas a girl, we saw in Rav Huna starts chinuch l'shos at 8, 4 years before, Rav Nachman is talking about a boy, and instead of 8, we're going to wait till he's 9. And it means 9 years and 1 day. So you've got from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 13. That's 4 years of chinuch l'shos. And again, this doesn't change between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. I'm sorry, between Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Both Rav Huna and Rav Nachman have chinuch l'shos of 4 hours, whereas Rav Huna is addressing a girl, and therefore he starts at the age of 8. Rav Nachman is addressing a boy. Again, we're talking about a bari now, and therefore it's to the age of 9. Now he goes on to address the case of a chola, ben eser. So we postpone the chinuch l'shos by 1 year, and therefore he starts at the age of 10. And if you remember, Rav Huna said that for a chola, she starts at the age of 9. That's because he's talking about a girl. Rav Nachman is talking about a boy, and therefore instead of for a chola starting chinuch l'shos at 9, we started at 10. Now we get to Hashlama, which is only a chiv d'Rabbanan to fast the entire day. Ben Achatisrei, Ben Shtemisrei. So chinuch l'Hashlama is 2 years in the case of a bari, 1 year in the case of a chola. 2 years means he starts fasting a full day at the age of 11. Again, Rav Huna spoke about Hashlama at the age of 10, but that's because he was addressing the case of a Tinokes. And she will start 2 years before Gadlus. Her Gadlus at 12, she'll start Hashlama at the age of 10. In the case of a boy, as Rav Nachman points out, the Chinuch Hashlama, complete the fast, is postponed by 1 year to the age of 11. And Ben Shtemisrei in the case of a cholam. So a weak composition child, and we're talking about a male child, will get 1 year of Hashlam. And all that is midrabanan. Ben Shloshes Mashlim Midoraisa Betino. And if we talk about a boy, which is Rav Nachman's subject, then only at the age of 13 is Hashlama fasting Dorais. Now we get to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who rejects the whole concept of Hashlama. There is no Hashlama on a Rabbanan level. Obviously, Midoraisa at the age of 13 and 12, there's Hashlama. So Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Hashlama Midrabanan Lekan. The Rabbanan never required a child before the age of bar mitzvah, to fast the entire day. And therefore, all that Rav Yochanan has on his radar screen is chinuch l'shos. Ben eser. So chinuch l'shos, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is only 2 years. Until now, we've discussed 4 years, because we had 2 years of Hashlama and then 2 years before that of Shos, whether it was Rav Huna or Rav Nachman. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, we don't have that buffer zone of Hashlama. It doesn't exist. And therefore, we're only talking about chinuch l'shos, and it's going to be 2 years in the case of a bari and 1 year in the case of a chola. And we're only talking about shos. Therefore, in the case of a girl, it's going to be ben eser if she's healthy, ben achasrei, only 1 year of chinuch l'shos if she's a chola, mechanchen sol l'shos. Now we go to a boy. Oh, first of all, on a deraisa level, ben shtemisrei mashlim mideraisa. And in the case of a boy, we're going to have chinuch l'shos in a healthy boy at the age of 11, and that gives him 2 years of chinuch l'shos. In the case of a chola at the age of 12, and we give him 1 year of shos. Tonight we learned in our Mishnah, Tinokos ein ma'anin oson b'yom HaKippur, aval mechanchen oson lifnei shana lifnei shtayim. And the Gemara is going to interpret this Mishnah according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, which is one shita, and raise an objection to Rav Yochanan, meaning we're going to have a problem reading this Mishnah according to Rav Yochanan. Bishlema l'Rav Huna Rav Nachman, they hold, let's talk about a case of a bari, that we begin chinuch l'shos 4 years before Gadlus. Then we could say that the Mishnah is referring to 2 different zmanim. And what does that mean? We're talking about, in the Mishnah, a chola. And when the Mishnah speaks about lifnei shana, lifnei shnatayim, we're talking about shos. Now, according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, shos means those years before Hashlam. So how do we work this out? We read the Mishnah thus: lifnei shana, lifnei shtayim, lifnei shana lidivreim means a year before the requirement of Hashlama, which is the Rabbanon, and lifnei shtayim lidivrei Torah, which is going to be 2 years before bar mitzvah bat mitzvah. And we're talking about chinuch of Hashlama. So we have here 2 different zmanim. We're going to talk about one zman, which is a chinuch l'shos, and we're going to talk about another zman, which is a chinuch lehashlama. And that's what we mean when we say that the Mishnah is talking about 2 different zmanim. And again, we're talking about a chola. So the child is of weak composition, and we begin to be mechanic the child 3 years before Gadlus, in a case of a chola. And now the Mishnah means lifnei shana, lifnei shnatayim. The lifnei shana means the hashlama of a drabanan, and shtayim is the hashlama of doraisa. But it all means it all comes back to the same exact thing, which means 3 years before the chiyuv tainus of hashlama doraisa, and 2 years before the chiyuv hashlama derabban, and all that is for a chol. So that works out according to Rav Nachman and Rav Huna. Ela Rav Yochanan, who denies the entire concept of hashlama, kasha. We don't have l'chora a way of interpreting our Mishnah. Why? So here we're going to summarize the commentaries, Rashi and others. We're going to say the following. We cannot allow for the interpretation of the Mishnah the way Rav Huna and Rav Nachman interpretation, because they had 2 zmanim, and therefore we were able to interpret that these 2 zmanim are really one zman. They're just different words. It's lifnei hashlama d'Rabbanan or lifnei hashlama d'Oraisa. But Rabbi Yochanan holds that there is no such thing as hashlama d'Rabbanan, so that option is not available. We also want to reject another option that let's interpret the Mishnah the way Rav Chizda interpreted the Mishnah, and Shana was a chola and Shnatayim was a bari. And that would mean that we're talking about 3 years for a bari and 2 years for a chola. According to Rabbi Yochanan, there's only 2 years of chinuch l'shos for a bari and only 1 year for a chola. Rabbi Yochanan says, I can reconcile myself with the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about 1 zman for a bari and 1 zman for a chola. Ema, but we have to leave out from the Mishnah the word lifnei. If you leave out the word lifnei, everything fits into place. Why? It's Shana Oshtayim Samach Lepirkon, which means, according to Rabbi Yochanan, in the case of a girl, we're talking about the age of 10, if she's a bari, and in the case of a boy at the age of 11. Now we get to Shana, which means in the case of a boy at the age of 11, in the case of a girl at the age of 10, because now we're talking about a chol. So now the Gemara is going to quote a brisa that seems to contradict Rav Huna Rav Nachman. Toshma, the Tani Rabbi Bar Shmuel, Rabbi brisa from Rabbi Shmuel. Tinokos ein ma'anid son b'yom kippurim. In other words, there's no training for hashlama, for a full day of fast. So Bishleim Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that chinuch l'shos is 1 year before godless in the case of a chol, 2 years before godless in the case of a bari nicha. Everything fits in very well in this brisa. So that's what the brisa means by shana o shtayim. Okay. However, Rav Huna Rav Nachman, they hold that this chinuch l'shos of 3 years and 4 years, 3 years for a chola and 4 for a bari, kasha, how are they going to interpret this brisa? The brisa is talking about 1 year and 2 years. Amri lecha Rabbanan. Rabbanan is a reference to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. My chinuch nami dikatani lashlama. That the subject of this brisa is not chinuch l'shos, but chinuch lashlama, which is going to be 1 year of fasting before godless in the case of a chole, and 2 years before godless in the case of a bari. The Gemara objects to mi kari lechinuch hashlama. The brisa uses the term chinuch. That's not hashlama. Chinuch means l'shos. For Tanya, I'll prove it to you from a brisa. Ezu chinuch hayaragil lechol shtei shos. Right, he usually eats breakfast. Let's say daybreak is at 6. He eats breakfast at 8. Machilin also shalosh. We won't feed him breakfast until 9, so he gets 1 hour of training. B'shalosh, he usually eats breakfast at 9. Machilin also bi'arba shalosh. We'll feed him breakfast at 10. So we see clearly that the word chinuch is referring to shalosh. Omar Rava Bar Ula Trei Chinuch Havi. The word chinuch refers to 2 different categories. There's chinuch l'shos and there's chinuch l'ashlomo. And this leads us to the next Mishnah. Ubra shehi richa. A pregnant woman smells the smell of something's cooking over the fire on Yom Kippur. And she has a tremendous taiva to eat that food, and she's pregnant. And if she doesn't eat, there's a sakana. And here we have machlokas rishonim, exactly whose life is endangered if she doesn't eat. One school of thought would say her life is in danger. Another school of rishonim will be of the opinion that whether it's her life or the ubar, the fetus's life, it makes no difference. Even for the sake of sakana li'ubar, for the fetus, we will desecrate Yom Kippur and allow her to eat. We feed her until the point that her taiva to eat has dissipated. And a case of a chola, this is already a new paragraph in the Mishnah, and we'll see that there are 2 expert physicians who have determined that this chola has to eat. So imagine the case is that the chola himself says, I don't have to eat, but 2 expert physicians say that he has to eat, and we will feed him. Now, exactly why we need 2 rofim, that's going to be the sugya daf pei gimel. Let's say it's a case where he says he doesn't have to eat, and it could be that his voice will override 1 rofeh. We need 2 bikim, 2 experts. The ancient bikim, and he himself says, I have to eat. My life is in danger. Until he says, enough, I'm fine. The Gemara says, Ton Rabbanon, Ubra she'iricha b'sar kodesh. O b'sar chazir. So we're talking about a pregnant woman. And she has a tremendous taiva to eat meat. And in this case, it's either b'sar kodesh or b'sar chazir, both of which are prohibited. Is we go step by step. We don't feed her immediately basar. First, tochvin la kush. The rotev. We take a small stick that has like a round ball at the end of it, and we dip it into the rotev, to the gravy of this tavchil, this meat cooking. Umenichem la alpia. And we put it on her mouth, and she starts sucking the juice, the rotev, the gravy of this meat. Even this yashva daita muta. If she's okay now, she's no longer in this wild state of taiva, then fine. Im lav, if she still has this tremendous taiva to eat meat, then we go to stage number 2. Machilin osa rotev atzma. We feed her the gravy of this tavsh. In this yashva daita mutav, the im lav, if she still wants the basar, she's not satisfied with the rotev, and therefore she hasn't quieted down her tremendous desire to eat, then machilin osa shuman atzma. And a pregnant woman, now we give her the shuman, the fat, meaning the meat itself. Shuman is another word for basar. Now, why do we feed her basar? I mean, we're talking about non-kosher food or kodesh that she's not allowed to eat. Because for the sake of saving a life, we override the mitzvahs HaTorah, except for 3 exceptions. Chutz mi avodah zarah v'gila rayis u'shvichus dam. Avodah zarah minolan. What is the basis from which we derive that for avodah zarah we will not override avodah zarah for the sake of pikuach nefesh? The sanya, because we learned in the following brisa. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, the Torah says, "V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha," and the Torah is enjoining us to love God and not worship another God. And there are 3 parts to the pasuk. We have b'chol nafshecha, which means with his nefesh. B'chol modecha means his money. So nemar b'chol nafshecha, lama nemar b'chol modecha. If the Torah is demanding that you give up your life rather than violate avodah zarah, then it goes without saying that you have to give up your money. V'im nomar b'chol modecha. Now you've told me that a person who loves his money more than his life has to give up his money. The ultimate sacrifice is love and emer b'chol nafshecha. And the answer is the Torah is addressing 2 different categories, profiles of individuals. His life is worth more than all his money. Is l'kach nemer b'chol nafshecha. His money is worth more to him than his life. Is l'kach nema, the Torah addresses him and says, b'chol modech, you have to be willing to give up all your money rather than worship avodah zarah. Fine, but gili arai shvichas damim minolan, you've now established that the mitzvah of ahavta demands that you give up your life rather than violate avodah zarah. But what about shvichas damim and gili arayos? The sanya that we learn from the Bryce of Rebbe Omer, with regard to nara murasa. And the Torah is addressing in Dvarim Chavpeis Parshas Kitetse a case of a married woman who was raped. And the Torah says, Lo tasa davar. Why? Because she is in a rape situation. And then the Torah adds a strange phrase to justify why she is not condemned in a case where she was raped. That this Nara should not be punished because she is a victim of rape. And the Boel, who forced her to have this relationship with her, is like a rotzeach. He's like someone who tries to kill her. She is a total victim of, in this case, rape, but like a victim of murder. Now Rebbe asks the following question. Why did the Torah have to set up this analogy between ones and ritzicha? I mean, you've already told me that lanaro lo nasid davar, there's no punishment for, because she's a rape situation. Lanaro lo nasid davar tells me everything I have to know. Why do you have to compare it to the victim of murder? Ella hareza bola lamed v'nimtza lamed. That even though the pasuk seems to be teaching us something about Nara Murasa, but it's also teaching us from Nara Murasa something about Rotzech. So we're going to go in both directions. Excuse me for just a minute. Okay. If it works, it works.